Welcome to the Regents Roundtable. I'm Stephen Ludwig. My guest today is Marianne Cutter. Dr. Cutter is a professor at the Department of Philosophy at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs. She holds a PhD in philosophy from Georgetown University through the Kennedy Institute of Ethics program. Dr. Cutter's areas of focus are philosophy of medicine, biomedical ethics, global concepts of death, and ethical decision making. She has written 7 books and is the author of numerous publications on the philosophy of disease and bioethic topics, including AIDS, genetics, death and dying, and breast cancer. Her current work includes the book Thinking Through Breast Cancer, a philosophical exploration of diagnosis, treatment, and survival, and Death, a Reader. That sounds like light reading. In 1997, Professor Cutter received the University of Colorado System Service Award for her work in developing genetic protection legislation for the state of Colorado. And we're going to ask her about that. In 2018, she was recognized as a University of Colorado President's Teaching Scholar, which is one of the institution's highest honors. She has served on numerous ethics boards on local, regional, state, national, and international organizations. In spring 2017, Professor Cutter taught a course on biomedical ethics as well as death and dying for a semester at sea, which met with healthcare providers around the world. Dr. Cutter was one of my professors back in the day, and she was my senior thesis advisor at the University of Colorado Springs, and she's one of the main reasons I majored in philosophy. And as I like to tell people in higher education, if you don't like me, blame Marianne. So, Dr. Cutter, thanks for being here today, and we'll just jump right in. Over in our conversations over the years, you have described yourself as a teaching scholar. What do you mean by that? What is that, and how is that different than some other scholars?
Well, I think there's four pieces of it, and the first one is not insignificant. And what uh, teaching scholars spend not just a lot, but like a lot of time on, which is course planning and course revision. And while it could be the simplest revision of something I've been teaching for I'm lost count, 34 years or so at the University of Colorado, it's a major shift in a delivery. So adding a new topic, deleting something, adding something that students really like. For example, in the online world, they really like discussion threads. So adding more of them, engaging with them, but not controlling them. I mean, I can just go on and on. So course planning. I think the second one is the engagement part, which is part of the course planning to build engagement. So, for example, in the live class, it's being present, showing up, being present, knowing folks' names, looking out for signs that someone is, all of that stuff. In the online world, which we've all experienced not only during COVID, but some for pre-COVID, and some of us will be online post-COVID because the curriculum fits well. It's building engagement there, and that I think has been that's a current challenge that I have, and I'm really interested in it and working on different things. I ask my students, does this work? I always use a student's name, call the student by a name. And if I spell it wrong, if I say it wrong, I correct there's some different emphasis in the online world, in this tech world that I'm reading up on and working on. I think the third thing is I'm a teacher. I'm not the friend, although, Steve and we've had I was trying to count the years, and I
It's
uh,
better not. Yeah.
when we met, I had
We met in 1980 in Intro to Ethics.
I know, and I'd recently gotten married, and now 3 kids later and 5 grandchildren later, it's been a great friendship. So thank you. But the third one is student evaluation, and I need to evaluate students, and I need to evaluate them fairly and consistently, clearly. And so I'm always tweaking my rubric and explaining why I am evaluating someone based on those kinds of things. The fourth one is staying up to date. And that I think that's really where the research, the teaching scholar, the scholarship piece really is highlighted because I need to stay up. And it doesn't mean I stay up on everything. We all need to give up perfection because doesn't exist. But it's staying up on being relevant, understanding how one's discipline in mind philosophy of medicine and then bioethics, but in a particular way. I'm an end of life specialist. I'm not a beginning of life specialist, but in the end of life issues, staying up, making sure I'm as current as I can be, and then sharing that material in a way that's accessible to the students. So I think these four pieces, the course planning, the engagement with student, the evaluation, which none of us like to do, but that's my job. And the fourth one is staying up to date, come together and I think create what is called teaching scholar at the University of Colorado. And I'm very proud to be one. I think it's a wonderful program. I think all universities should have this kind of program. So,
Well, it's interesting. What I hear is this deep level of one, this comes out of your own, I think, commitment to the classroom, but a deep respect for the students and what you're up to,
yeah,
right? Because when you say, I'm going to get the student's name right, if I get it wrong, I will correct myself. And to me, I might miss that in the moment, but like, oh, no, you're honoring me as a human being, you're honoring me as a student, updating your course curriculum. That says you value the student experience. And then, there's been a lot of writing about what scholars do in the research, and sometimes the research is so esoteric it doesn't come back to the classroom. But I would think the latest in bioethics and the end of like certainly comes back because that's evolving all the time.
right. Right. And
Yeah.
I think I have it easy, Steve. I mean, I'm an ethicist, so you take respect for persons seriously. So and then it all flows from that. Flows from
Yeah.
that. So that's easy. The second piece is that I'm a biomedical ethics ethicist, and while my 20-year-olds are not, for the most part, not at the end of their lives, they all know someone who is their grandmother, their dog, their neighbors who's been a mentor to them. And so it's making what I do relevant to them. And then outside, when I work with long-term care groups and hospice groups, of course it's relevant.
Uh,
So and they've all been patients. They've all been a patient.
mhm.
So they understand, medicine is in our lives whether we like it or not. And how do we navigate that? So
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think most regents and trustees, they don't have a background. I think the number I've heard is 15% of trustees have some background in higher ed. So most don't when they join a board. Can you explain the different approaches to scholarship between might be considered something more hardcore researchy and the liberal arts or science based? And again, I'm very loose with these terms and you'll have to forgive me. And
no,
the science and liberal arts, yeah.
I like that you're loose with the terms. I actually, just to start to put my cards on the table, I think some of these disciplinary divisions have been problematic, very problematic, not just structurally, in terms of what we each do, and we're all working in these separate and distinct pods and stuff, but I think ethically, I think ethically, but anyway, um, but I think the history that comes from the modern classical period is that the hard sciences, excuse me, are based on your methodology. It's about method. It's based on the scientific method, right? So I could go through a whole lecture on that, but I won't. Hypothesis, right? And then you investigate, and then you draw conclusions or evidence, and then you make a claim about the event. So most of us have had that in high school. What's key to that is the empirical method or empirical data. It's empirical data. So what's your data? Now, I like data as a biomedical ethics. I mean, I need data. We all need data. Um, but the hard sciences will sort of like, okay, there's my data, and maybe stop there. And that's important, but there's more to say about the data, which is interpretation, and where are we going with this, and the meaning of the data, and we select certain data and not other data, and blah 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 blah. And I think another piece of the puzzle, so one was the scientific method, two, the heart of that is empirical data, and the third is an analytic approach, which it's more linear, if you will, more causal, if you will. This sets this, that sets this, sets this, sets this up. And that's very important. Again, we need it. As a biomedical ethicist, I draw from that, but it's not the whole picture. So the if you will, the liberal arts are anything but liberal. I mean, they're very. I mean, the methodology is very tight, very important. Is more of a narrative approach, which recognizes that we bring a framework to the data, to the experience, to the what we observe. And so I'm interested as a biomedical ethicist, as an ethicist in that, and probably, I mean, very much interested in that. What assumptions and claims do you make about the data that you bring, right? And maybe how should we tweak that? And then for me, I add on, ethically speaking, is this right and good and or good about the data? Because the data, this is something Dick Lamb said to me years ago. Oh my gosh. He says, Marianne, statistics are without tears. They can take you anywhere and everywhere you want to go, and that's not always good. And I always remember that, and I think he's right. So the science, the liberal arts, again, the narrative tradition, as well as I would adding in the historical tradition, which I also do and others do, and a heuristic tradition, a contextual tradition, and there's other terms for that.
So
Now,
there's
yeah,
sorry,
in,
there is a strong rigor there. You're not done. I'm
oh
sorry. Please
yes.
continue. Yeah, yeah.
Oh yes, yes, because one needs to, I think, recognize the tradition in which you're working in. And I have traditions in which I work in, and then that's why we cite. That's why we say, so and so says this, I'm building on this. So you show the tradition in which you work. Exactly. Which takes a little bit longer time sometimes. I mean, I write books. I don't write short articles anymore. I can't do it. It's too, I write books and I spend a couple of years on the books and then they come out. And now, last point, cycling back to the beginning, I think the divisions are problematic. I
Mhm.
think we higher ed likes to talk a lot about interdisciplinary work, multidisciplinary work, da 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 da. And I don't think higher ed in general, very general claim, they don't get it. They don't get what it needs to really create that kind of environment because what higher ed I think means by that, and also I mean lower ed. My own our daughter is a fourth grade teacher on the East Coast. What that mean school systems mean is you bring together people from different perspectives and they say what they're going to say. If you really want to do multidisciplinary integrative work, you need to meld it and you need to recognize it. That's the world I live in as a biomedical ethics ethicist. I'm working always with different individuals and trying to integrate what's being said and then where are we going to go with this, especially during COVID, which is my recent project. So
Yeah. So this brings up there's a challenge with if we accept the assumption that people follow rewards, and that could be debated, of course. Then I've set up, I being the institution, I being my academic discipline, I being the rewards, my whatever, whatever, all the I'm your PhD advisor. All the rewards are set up for you to go narrower, narrower, narrower. And what you're suggesting is a broader connecting thing.
mhm.
So, are off the top of your head, is there a reward we could develop that would encourage people to develop that kind of scholarship or relationship? Either I assume they'd have to be tenure track faculty because the risk would be too high otherwise.
Hmm. Yeah, then we get into that. Yeah,
Yeah,
let me bracket that one because that's
yeah,
a
yeah. That's yeah.
yeah.
We don't
I
want to go there.
think
Yeah,
I mean, I think the reward I think it's a lot of work to truly do interdisciplinary work. So, I mean, I start with the usual answer to what the reward system looks like, which are offloads or at least just rethinking the loads that individuals have because more and more if I'm staying with my load, I'm in my silo and then credit is given to a particular department and the department wants you to teach in the silo. Of course it does. Of course it does. I get that.
yeah,
Right? Because that's how they count the beans. That's how they count the numbers. That's how they give you
yeah.
the funds, right? And it just cycles out and it feeds itself. Thinking about loads and then thinking about where the loads are, where the courses are, what's being recognized as if you will, the source that is being, if you will, reimbursed or funds are
So
going
when you
to.
say, I'm sorry, I need some
Yeah,
clarification. When
yeah,
you
yeah,
say load, you mean a department load? So I need so many students to get my budget numbers hit. And so if
yeah.
that load is off, I lose money.
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's sometimes I'm like, I'd like to get 3 or 4 people that I know and get together and teach this like course, not within any department that's there, and just do a really cool class, or and then I don't know, use those funds to do something else. I mean, that kind of thing. No, I teach in philosophy. So I teach the courses that are going to bring individuals, which will mostly be the humanities. Well, that's not true. I mean, I teach a lot of the pre-healthcare professional
Mhm.
students. And the second thing is I think is stipends or additional funds. Travel, working in collaborative ways, and there are programs. University of Colorado does have programs like that. They'll tend to go toward the, if you will, the more popular, or the programs that are going to draw more and more individuals.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think the third, we've talked about the loads, which is probably, I should have started with this, which is it's evaluation, is how you count the beans, how you evaluate counting the beans.
Mhm.
And we're evaluated within departments. And I know there's a couple of exceptions, individuals who are evaluated within 2 or 3 units, but that gets really tricky. But that's not the norm. The norm is we're in with that one individual, or one.
So
So, you know,
I think the takeaway here for our regents or trustees or visitors or whatever they're called, wherever they are, is asking a question of their administrators and their faculty leaders if this is something that would be desirable, which I think you articulated that it would be. What are the institutional barriers to making that happen? And then how can we begin to develop something or ask the administration to develop something to make it similar? What you described, I think, is not unique to your particular campus or any particular university. From what I've read and whom I've talked to, it's a very very common problem. And so I'm glad we brought it up and talked about it. The other thing with research is
yeah.
again, a lot of what I've read is a lot of researchers do not take the time to develop their classroom skills the way you have, because it's not rewarded. Classroom stuff just isn't really, people don't really care about classroom work at a research university. And Colorado Springs is an R2, which is a lower tier than an R1, and that's another conversation.
And we
But
care about teaching. UCCS,
yeah,
we care about teaching. So,
yeah, and a lot of institutions don't. So that's very interesting.
right.
Let's move on
Yeah.
because one of the things
One
we
other
talked
thing is
about.
that
Sure, please, yeah.
for viewers is that I think what I say, I'm coming from a privileged position of a university and then a campus, the UCCS, that has enough funds to build these departments. There's a number of universities around the country who that do not have those kinds of funds. And so my comment about the interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary stuff is really relevant to folks like that. And how do you think about the not just the reward, getting people in reward systems, but evaluating in a way that's going to, I think, be in tune with where we are going, where we are going. Most of our disciplines now are multidisciplinary. I cannot do biomedical ethics without, but my sustainability into friends can't do sustainability without the sciences and then the theory about sustainability. You see, it just, we're in this point because I think information comes in so fast these days because of the technology that we're exposed to a wider view of our problems that we're working on. And so this will be the future. I think 100 years, 200 years from now, universities they'll we'll have to grapple with this.
What was to affirm your point, in the business world where I spent most of my career, the humanities was incredibly important because I was beginning to work with people from all over the world.
Right.
from Abu Dhabi and Argentina and Mexico and Italy and Canada, and each country has its own thing. And the humanities gave me a framework to engage with individuals in a way that was respectful and meaningful. That is often missing in some business interactions. And as the world becomes more, especially in the online world, more global, I'm spoiled that everyone in the business world, most everyone, the people I'm dealing with, speak English. It's the language of business. But again, the respect and the understanding, and that it would be missing without that background. Okay,
Absolutely.
so that's just emphasizing your points about interdisciplinary thing is critical in a number of areas. So one of the an area I was at Regent for 12 years, and one of the things that sort of remained a mystery was how departments actually work. Now, in a way, this makes sense. The board should be up here, and if we gotten to the department level, something's gone seriously wrong because that's major micromanagement. So I think knowing how the most fundamental unit of a college or university works would be helpful. And I know that different departments operate differently due to size. And you mentioned like some institutions have more departments and less because of what's going on. But I'm hoping you can give us a pretty general idea of how this works. Now, you've been department chair. What does a department chair do?
Well, the department chair at our campus, University of Colorado in general, and then University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, um, is is the administrator of the department, is sort of the administrative leader of the department. So there's all kinds of organizational stuff, those macro things, making sure that in the year has a number of things that are due, reports and submission of the curriculum that's coming up, blah 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 blah. It also the chair oversees personnel, not the funding and not the hiring and the firing. That at UCCS does. It's dean and above that has that ability, but it's the hiring, or it's the processes through which the hire goes. I mean, and that turns on, and this is probably the biggest challenge for a chair, understanding the departmental policies, the campus policies, the CU university wide policies, and bringing those together to ensure that one is following, again, the policies and the processes of the university. It takes a lot of work. Just like, I can't just do this. I have to do this, and so fortunately, you're working with a team. Most departments do really well. Most departments have some experienced individuals, have senior members who give advice there. At UCCS, we have the just the privilege and the joy of having open doors all the way from our deans, provost, all the way to our chancellor. I think the bigger the university it is, the more challenging that is. So, is that
Yeah.
sufficient, or do you want more detail? Or?
No, that's great. I have a couple follow-up questions. Do you get more money for it? And do you get any training for it? Did anyone train you on all this stuff you had to learn?
There is a stipend. Now, I was chair back in 2008 to 2012, and I think my stipend was 3,000. Now I think it's up to 8 to 10,000 at UCCS.
Okay.
I believe it is more at Boulder.
So it's
And
gonna
so
depend on the campus
Yes,
wherever.
yeah, it
Yeah, okay.
depends on the campus. So yes, there is additional funding for that, and typically an offload. So if one is teaching 3 courses, you teach 2, or if you're teaching 2 courses, you're teaching 1. All right.
That makes sense.
The
Yeah.
second thing is the mentoring. That's yeah, that or the training. That's a great question, because
It was a
I don't
setup
think the
because
standard training. It's just a great question.
yeah.
But I will say that the two critical pieces of that are, one, it's mentoring. Is Now that's tricky. For We have a number of new programs at UCCS, and there's not the senior member, the associate professor to professor. And I've been on committees in other, not only departments but colleges at UCCS, to give advice about whether it's hiring or it's some whatever, and then helping them develop policies for their unit. But um, uh, in, in philosophy for us, and I think in many other departments at the universities, at the University of Colorado, you have senior individuals who will mentor, and it's including like the former chair. All right. The second thing is, I think the where I think that's built in. In addition, there is offered more on an ad hoc basis than on a standard basis, the opportunity to do different types of training. The University of Colorado offers a variety of levels from system to lower to emerging leader programs. And I could go on. It's wonderful. And I think if the incoming chair asks, there's some opportunities. But if you don't ask, you don't have to do any of that. So again, mentoring programs we already have that are available. Um, I think the most important thing to get a hold of when one becomes a chair is understanding institutional structure. And Steve, I think you as regent, that was something that was like, whoa, I got to understand how it works. And I started in, oh my goodness, 1987. I became chair not till 2008. I'll be frank, I was raising children. I was not going to take on more than I could do. So 2008, they were starting to, fly, and I was chair to 2012, and I could not believe how much I did not understand about institutional structure. And it became a commitment of mine through different programs and hanging out a lot in the dean's office, in the provost's office, to go, why does it work this way? How does it work this way? And we were just in that time getting all of our policies online, which was, I think the online world has so much advantage. I'm a fan of the opportunity we have with getting information. And, back in the day, you'd walk in and have someone pull a paper version of something.
Or a
So,
binder.
but our binder, oh my goodness, the binders. But still, it's hard to find things. I was, I mean, probably every month I Google something about the institution, about a policy, about somebody, because someone asks me, Miriam, what's the policy about this? What do you think about this? I'm like, well, I don't know. I go on and I'm like, I got to work to find it. And then I call my friends up at the provost office and say, where is it? So,
So the point I brought up,
yeah.
and I said it was a bit of a setup, is most universities, from what I see, don't really give specific training to department chairs. And it's curious to me that you were at the institution for 22 years, and you still didn't know a lot, which makes sense because you weren't dealing
I
with all
wasn't
that.
there.
And I think for regents and trustees, it's important to know like that might be something they should help maybe consider or have conversations about, because I want you to. I think part of my job as a board member is to ensure everyone can be successful at their position. Again, we shouldn't be involved at that level because that's not our thing, but having those kind of conversations is important. Now,
It is, and then the question is how do you do the training? These 8-hour things don't work.
now,
And I think the university, it seems to me, it's moving in the direction of let's develop policies, policies, policies from the lowest level to sort of the highest administration level. And then you have to understand how to read policy and who's writing the policy and does it make sense. So it's tricky. I'm
yeah.
not suggesting there's a simple answer
Oh
here.
no.
I think
If only if
mentoring someone to mentor you is by far the best, because when you have the question, when you're confronted with the issue, and the personnel ones are the trickiest,
Mm,
you get to say, what would you do, or where do I go, or how do I think about this? Who do I call? So
yeah. When
kind
it
of
comes to
a
yeah,
decision tree model.
when
Yeah,
it comes to training, if we only had experts on how to teach people stuff on campus that could help us out develop
yeah.
that stuff,
Yeah,
that
and
would
I
that
and I ju last thing, yeah, exactly. Last thing, very quick. Not everybody wants to be chair, Steve.
no, no, of course not.
Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't sign up for academics to be chairs,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know? So,
Yeah. And that's a thank you for bringing that up because that I you've been trained in a very specific skill set that we've brought you on board for. And this is a completely different skill set. And some people are going to do it for a little while and go, oh, I'm good at it. And
mhm,
others are going to go, I'm not good at it and I hate it. And I
mhm,
think we need to have a lot of room for that
mhm,
because some people will be gifted at that and some people won't.
mhm, and others are
Just,
good at it, but hate
yeah,
it. So,
yeah.
yeah, there's a whole bunch of
All
categories,
that.
yeah.
Does the department chair or does the how do you pick what classes are taught when? Is that at the department level? Is that with the college? Is it a negotiation?
At UCCS, it's departmental, and
Okay.
it's history. It's a history of the department, numbers and area of foci. So all departments have to have that tough process of discussion about what do we do? Who are we? And I think UCCS folks have done that really well. I think some don't. I've been in and out of the business of program review, so I've got some experience on this. And you decide, okay, so who are we? What kind of training can we give? So that's one, and then number two, this area we want to work, we want to develop, et cetera, et cetera. And then numbers, yes, I've got my numbers for that. And then there's a consideration of where our students are going to go.
Yeah.
At UCCS, most of our students go into the workforce. And so, I mean, ethics. So I'm a biomedical ethics. Everybody's going to be a patient. We've got a number of pre-healthcare provider students. So we're good there. We have a number of students who are going to go into major companies, and there'll be HR and to understand the ethical issues with regard to healthcare. I mean, so we think about it that kind of way. And then there's some times we have to retire certain foci, saying, it's not working. It's we lost somebody. We don't want to rehire in that area. The department at UCCS is able to decide that in consultation with the dean, and the provost can always have a say over this depending on areas of development. Right now, cybersecurity is hot on campus. Our departments, I mean, it would be great in philosophy to have a cybersecurity person. We don't have one. And so maybe that would be the future, but it's not right now. But at least we know that would be a growing area on campus. So,
So
and,
let
and then again, policies. The department has policies about how we hire, what members can be on the committee, numbers. There's campus policies, CU policies, just generally about processes. So
okay. So when it comes to so let's say you have an opening for a tenure track position. Is that and again UCCS is great if you can speak larger to how you've heard other institutions do it as well. Is that a negotiation between you and your dean, you and the provost? Do you get to decide? And then when it comes to hiring, it sounds like you create a committee to vet potential candidates.
yes, yes. And I'm glad you brought the dean back because the dean is always involved in this. And I think my preliminary comment suggested that but the department, that's how it works. It's like, okay, who are we going to hire? I mean, we really figure it out. We go to the dean and give a proposal when there's an opening or when there are funds, right? And say, this is what we want. We justify that. We give a history of numbers, a history of classes that we've been offering for 30 years or whatever it is, that are important and how it fits into not only what we're doing, but also what other individuals might be doing. That would be our philosophy of religion sequence, as well as this is an area we want to continue to grow or we want to grow. And then the dean takes it to the provost. And on our campus, we have I mean, we've got deans that understand what we do, provosts that understand what we do. We don't come up with, oh, we want a philosophy of comic book person,
Mhm.
which would be really interesting and cool, but that's not what we do. We don't, we don't do that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. But that's and it's important to understand that because there's a lot of conversations. It's just important, I think, for board members to understand how that fundamental unit. And again, it's going to depend on the campus. And I get we're using UCCS as an example of how the department goes. Here's where we think we are going. Here's where we think the need is, and then the conversation that happens between the various levels. I think that is usually not clear to board members how that actually works. And so that's why I just wanted to talk about that briefly.
Yeah, and it's a shame is that the cases that kind of become public media, receive public media attention are the ones where someone donates funds for a particular faculty member and then begins to tell a department what to do, and that's not the norm. So what I've described is the norm, and if somebody
Mhm.
wants to come and, Bill Gates wants to come to our door and say, "I'd like a position in X, Y, or Z, A, B, Z." I mean, we would listen. We may not say yes to it, but we certainly would listen to anybody who would like to, give us a couple $1 million. So,
Endowed chair, yeah,
yeah, right,
or endowed position, sure.
right.
Um, you've been engaged. We talked about your engagement in the community, and I think you are engaged. I think it's safe to say much more than most faculty. You served on ethics boards, nonprofit boards, government committees. You've helped develop curriculum for high school students. As I mentioned in the introduction, you worked with lawmakers to develop genetic protection legislation for the state of Colorado. Why are you doing that type of work? Is that just kind of your personal ethic?
Yeah, I mean, I would. My first answer is yes, but then I would retract that. I mean, I just live a purpose-driven life.
Yeah.
But I'd retract it because I think a biomedical ethicist has to be relevant, to understand what's going on, what are the current issues, has to engage in these. It turns out to be service because when I'm working with a hospice group or a long-term care committee, currently in El Paso County, El Paso and Teller counties, and or consult on different cases. It is service because I'm typically not paid. I'm not an attorney. And so people look to me for consultation, for service consultation, and not, paid kind of things. And so it turns out to be that way. And I do stay current because I find out what's going on about, with regard to cases. We've all just been through COVID. It's not over. This ain't over. But and I remember, I was writing about some, esoteric stuff about COVID, um, in calling for medicine to keep the best interest of individuals in mind. And frankly, I was thinking about like the meds, distribution of meds and distribution of the PPE and blah 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 blah. And when I as our monthly ethics consults went on during the this those issues were brought up, but what was brought up is the plight of elderly individuals being left in their rooms, not because healthcare providers didn't like the elderly. It's just that the great resignation that was occurring and in elder care institutions, and there wasn't enough people to do that. And then healthcare workers had to fill out all this paperwork about COVID rates for the state. I'm talking about Colorado here. And so it's like, oh, we need to check on so and so. And I mean, I could go on, but the things that were happening were not the things that I was thinking about as a biomedical ethicist. And so I started to pivot and think about different issues. One other example is when I was in China a couple of years ago, I went in to talk about informed consent because I was asked to go in. And one of the doctors raised her hand and says, "Professor Cutter, I think this is really important. I know we asked you about this, but I really want to know about medical violence." And I went, "Medical violence? Tell me what's going on." And I got an earful about stuff about medical violence going on in healthcare institutions in Beijing. I was like, "Oh, Well, okay. So how we gotta think about this? What kind of processes can set up to protect not only the patients but also the healthcare providers? And so that's a little bit why I do that work. And then yeah, I bring that into bring it into my teaching. I bring it into my writing, my scholarship. I bring it into my teaching, and um, I think that's what we in part do as academics. We get excited. We have a problem set of problems we're interested in, and we continue to focus on that, and we're open to, oh, that's not what's happening. This is what's happening. So anyway.
So your service, does it so let me just cut to the chase. A lot of times faculty are judged on classroom, research productivity, and then service to the institution. And so, which means you serve on this committee and that committee, and they're horribly time consuming. But what you're talking about usually doesn't count for most faculty for promotion and tenure. And I think anyone that's listening to this or watching this would really go, wow, that's hugely valuable, not just for the students in the institution and your scholarship, but also for the community. And I especially think for public institutions, providing more opportunity for faculty that are interested. Some we wouldn't want them talking to the public ever, and they're great, right? Um, how could we, from a policy point of view, work with faculty to figure out how to encourage that kind of service that you've done, even if, like, all right, I'm going to go serve on the Boys and Girls Club, even though that might not be my expertise. There's a huge value there, I think, for the faculty member, certainly for the community and for the institution, but we haven't figured out how to reward that. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Some haven't. Yeah, I've been in my
That's
department
fair.
for a long
Yeah.
time, and so
Yeah.
there's something called the RPTs, the Retention, Promotion, and Tenure Guidelines, and that's with regard to evaluating my work, for example, taking myself as a case, as an example. Um, the retention, promotion, tenure guidelines that we used to have were really simple, and you're absolutely correct. It did not recognize this kind of work that I was doing. I remember in the 90s not being penalized, but not being given any credit for the high school education material that I was developing. I was working with a group, and we published with Department of Energy funds close to, I mean, 9 high school curriculum, and it wasn't given any credit. And I remember going to my department and saying, "This is not right." I went to my dean. "This is not right." Again, at UCCS, it's really easy to hang with the provost. This is not right. And so what happened, and this was not just a UCCS event, I think it was at the University of Colorado in general, an emphasis being placed on, okay, departments, go back to your policies, review what you have there, and does it adequately express what you all are doing? And we took that opportunity and started to add in, particularly for the tenured and then full professor levels, the recognition that going outside and doing this kind of service work is important. It's really important. And it's not just for the university. It's in my profession.
It's
This
a
is
win.
what we do.
Everybody wins.
This
I
is what
think
we do.
everyone's in it.
Everybody
Yeah.
wins.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think at the early stage of coming up as a faculty member, I mean, I can see that. I've been chair and I oversaw program review for many, many years on our campus. I understand that someone should be working within the discipline, publishing at those like first, second tier places. Your service should be on campus so you begin to understand institutional structure and blah, 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 blah. I was doing that and I was doing the other thing. And so as full professor, we put have again at the tenure and associate professor and full professor, we have that clearly stated that service outside in the community is 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 something that is evaluated positively. That kind of
But
thing.
at your department, other departments can make other choices.
That's true.
Okay.
That is certainly the
Yeah.
case, and
Alright.
I've been
Yeah.
on a lot of tons of evaluation committees, and I do my best trying to articulate the importance
Mhm.
of what it means to be not just a teacher, not just a scholar, but what it means to be an academic in
Mhm.
today's world that in which whether we like whether we like it or not. I mean, I like it. That university walls are broken down.
Mhm.
Um, um, anyway,
That's good to know. Again, so it's depends gonna depend on the institution,
departmental criteria,
and then it's gonna depend on the department. Yeah.
it really, really lodges with the departmental criteria with your dean's support,
Mhm. Mhm.
but departmental criteria.
Mm.
And
That's a lot of
there has
power at the
been
department
a
level.
yes, there is.
Mhm.
There's a lot of effort at the University of Colorado. This has come from University Central
Mhm.
to reevaluate those tenure promotion. Now, if I had a Snidely moment, I'd say is to to keep problems out of from going further, problems in advancements and things like that. But I think the positive interpretation of it is this recognition that and it is. I mean, service now like this is recognized in promotions in the current CU policies, as well as at the medical school, those who are doing clinical work, because clinical work takes so much time. Oh my goodness. And it's I'm not writing something, and am I serving? Not really. So there's a now clinical
Okay.
track recognition, which is yes,
Yeah.
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 So
Interesting. Alright, last set of questions. What, and I want you to speak as broadly as you can. I know, you you've been on one campus at one institution, but what do you think generally as you talk to faculty and your colleagues around the country and around the world, what do you think, how do you think faculty member view trustees and regents, and what do you think they get right, and what do you think they get wrong, and what do you think trustees and regents get wrong about faculty?
well, I think, I mean, per the description of a region for the University of Colorado, is that they're administrators in the most general sense of the term at the university, and they allocate the funds. I mean, that's big. That's big. It's the budget. All right. So yeah, a faculty get that. Yeah, they do that. I think when you ask faculty, do you think of Regent? Again, I have happened to know you. And so I'm like, well, they're people. When you know someone, it's amazing. Desmond Tutu talks about this and others. It's like when you get to know somebody, it changes perceptions. But if you ask the general person who's walking on campus, it's like, well, they're administrators at in Colorado, you also get their political minded folks because they have to run for office. They have to be voted in. And I believe that in other states, it's not always a voting process; it's a selection process
So
by
in the most common way, so there's 3 other states. So, Nebraska, Nevada, and Michigan elect their regents. No other state does. Most of the time, they're appointed by the governor, and sometimes with the approval of the state senate or some approval process. It is becoming more political depending on the state and who has an extra grind about what.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the perception, they're administrators, they're political they represent a political standpoint. And the third thing, and then even more snidely, is that they have no clue about what we do. Now, if I hadn't had the experience of, again, I mean, I don't know, 10 years of overseeing program review on our campus, and that interfaces with CU in general, working out of the provost office, which I love that work. I would not appreciate, if I didn't have that experience, I would not appreciate how a macro perspective is so important. And it's different. The administrative is different from the life of the faculty person who's like, okay, so today I've got to send emails to my fall student reminding them to buy the books because book distribution is a little slow these days. I mean, our region shouldn't have to worry about that, doesn't worry about that, and probably I wouldn't even want to tell a region about that, that I have to do that today. But that's my life. It's like I got to do the dishes, in a positive way. I'm a homemaker, so that's not a diss. And then I think the fourth thing is they just don't know me, you know? Now, I don't have that experience, the latter, the third and the fourth point, because I've known you. I don't think within all of that, I don't think faculty appreciate the how much time it takes to understand a budget at the level that we have at the University of Colorado, and all the details that go in, not detail, but general details that go into all of that, and the larger institutional challenges of then interfacing with the state government, and spending time ensuring that the perception of the University of Colorado is great. Blah 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 blah. So I think what might be advantageous is, yeah, I mentioned mentorship earlier, and I think it's really the game changer. It's again the Desmond Tutu thing of getting to know the individuals that you work with. Maybe regents could spend a little bit more time, and they come to campuses and they have their meetings on a campus, and that's great. But maybe get out and have lunch with a faculty person. I don't know, walk through campus, go sit in a half hour class, just walk around and live the life. I think, and then alternatively, maybe a faculty person, sort of like, oh, what are you doing? What do you do? And how do you do it? If they're interested in fun stuff,
Yeah,
funds or,
yeah.
finance and that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
And to echo your experience, knowing faculty, you and others, gave me much broader perspective and context. And I still think a lot of trustees and faculty, I mean, trustees and regents and what have you, just don't we don't get each other because we don't talk to each other. And I
Yeah.
think that's the end point there. And there's this huge understanding. It's like I'm more sympathetic. It's like, oh, you're dealing with what?
Hmm.
And then it was always really funny when
Hmm.
you would share with me, well, the regents require us to do this, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Some policy, right? It's like, well, the regents, they say the regents need this report. It's like, well, I never see that, so that's always funny to find out as well. But that thing of, I don't walk in your shoes anymore, so at all, and you don't walk in mine, so that conversation is really helpful. Like the experience you had in doing your service, right? Bringing it back to your own understanding.
Yes.
Okay, this is the last question, and I like to ask all my guests to wrap up with this. What do you like most about working in higher education?
Oh, it's the best job in the world. I think the best part is working with students, by far. It just students are so inquisitive, are so excited about learning, are higher ed is still pretty cool. We want to explore. We want to, I didn't get to that, so let's move on in this direction. What do how can I help you? What do you think? Despite maybe some of the perceptions of higher ed. I mean, most of us are not sitting on a beach doing nothing, or we're really working all the time. And I love to work all the time. It's an amazing, it's really a purpose driven life in a non-religious sense, in every way, um, I think the second thing is having problems. Most of us have problems that we've worked on for many years of our life. And I have had a problem, and I will never solve the problem. I mean, my problem is, what is death? I work on what is death and implications for how one understands death for practices, for life practices, and the rituals we set up, and the horrors of the body bags during COVID, and putting dead people in refrigerator trucks and mass graves here in the United States. I'm like, what were we thinking? I'm not the only one on this problem. But I continue to think about that, and it's just really great in life to live that kind of, you know, to have the ability to be not only paid because I'm fine, but now, but be recognized for work that I do in that area. So that's the teaching, the teaching, the service, and scholarship, and the service. Um, and it's the third thing is just working with just great people. Just I just work with great people. So yeah,
Terrific. Thank you. So this is a great conversation. Thank you for sharing your faculty perspective. It's
you're
super helpful. And I'm
welcome.
sure the folks listening to this will be much better regents and trustees because of it. So thank you.
Okay, thank
All
you,
right.
Steve.
All
All
right.
right, take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye bye now.